Shooting for Phoenix, number 11, Balu Ayayi.
The league's official story about Caitlin Clark's exit from that game is a carefully constructed piece of public relations management, and every single person who was actually in that arena watching with their own eyes knows it does not hold up. The establishment does not want you to look too closely at what happened on that court. They do not want you to slow it down, frame by frame, moment by moment, and ask the questions that the footage itself is screaming at you to ask. Because the moment you do, the entire carefully maintained narrative about what happened to Caitlin Clark that night collapses into something far more uncomfortable, far more revealing, and far more damning than anything the official press release was ever going to admit. Welcome back. This is Rim Run, and today we are ripping the doors off the story the league hoped would disappear in 24 hours.
Shooting for Phoenix, number 11, Balu Ayayi.
I want every single person watching this video to take a deep breath, sit down, and really process what we are about to walk through together. Because this is not a hot take. This is not speculation dressed up in outrage. This is a methodical, frame-by-frame reconstruction of a sequence of events that was captured on camera, in real time, by someone who was physically present inside that arena, and whose footage has now spread across the internet for one undeniable reason. Because what it shows does not match what we were told. Caitlin Clark, the most watched, most discussed, most consequential player the WNBA has seen in a generation. She walked off that court, walked straight to that locker room, and she never came back. Not to the bench, not to the floor, gone. And the people who run this league, the people who manage the messaging, the people who decide what the official injury report says and what it does not say, they want you to accept a clean, simple, painless explanation and move on. They are counting on you to not look at the footage. They are counting on you to trust the press release. They are counting on your short attention span. We are not moving on. Not today. Not until we have gone through every single detail of what that footage actually shows. Let us start at the beginning, because the beginning is where the official story first starts to crack. The footage in question was captured by a fan who was physically present at the game, seated close enough to the floor to document what was happening in real time. This was not a broadcast camera with a producer deciding what to cut away from. This was an unfiltered, unedited, unmanaged set of eyes on the situation as it unfolded. And what those eyes captured is this: Caitlin Clark to the right side of the frame, moving toward the locker room tunnel. Watch her face in that footage. Watch her expression. Watch her body language. The official story says this was a back injury. The official story says she was in pain, she was hurt, she needed to be evaluated. And here is the thing. Nobody is saying Caitlin Clark was not dealing with something physical. Nobody is disputing that she left the game. The question, the brutal and unavoidable question that the footage forces you to ask, is whether what you are seeing on that screen matches the description you were given. Because when you watch that footage, you are not watching someone who is visibly incapacitated. You are watching Caitlin Clark walk. Walk deliberately, walk directly, walk with purpose straight toward that tunnel. No assistance, no trainers flanking her. No visible distress in the way she is moving her body down that corridor. And the people who run this league, the people who craft the official narrative, are absolutely counting on you to not notice that disconnect. She walks to the locker room, and she does not come back. That is the fact. That is the undeniable, camera-documented, arena-witnessed fact. Caitlin Clark went to that locker room and she did not return to that game. Not to play, not to sit on the bench, not to be visible to the fans who paid to be in that building. Gone. Completely removed from the public eye for the remainder of that contest. Now I want you to hold that detail in your mind because we are going to come back to it. The absence, the total, complete, unexplained absence from the bench. Because that detail is the one that the official story struggles with the most. And it is the detail that the footage documents in the most damning possible way. Before we get to the most revealing moment in that entire piece of footage, I need you to understand the context of what was happening on that court. There was a huddle. A timeout huddle, the kind that happens dozens of times in a professional basketball game, where the coaching staff gathers the players together, draws up the next play, and the team breaks the huddle with a unified hand gesture. It is one of the most routine, reflexive, automatic things a basketball player does. You do not think about it, you just do it. It is muscle memory, it is team ritual. It is the smallest possible expression of collective belonging on a basketball court. Watch what Caitlin Clark does, or more precisely, watch what Caitlin Clark does not do in that huddle break. Watch her hands. Watch the moment when the team is supposed to come together for that break. She does not touch the hands. She does not participate in the break. In a moment that every single other player on that court treats as automatic, as involuntary, as something you do without thinking, Caitlin Clark withdraws. Her hands do not make contact with her teammates' hands. Now, I want to be precise here because precision matters when we are talking about something this significant. There are two possible explanations for what you see in that footage. The first explanation is the one the establishment will offer you. She was in pain, she was protecting an injury, she was already mentally and physically checked out because something was genuinely wrong with her body and she knew she was not coming back. That is a legitimate explanation. That is a possible explanation. But here is the second explanation, and this is the one that the footage, taken as a whole, forces you to at least consider. What if the withdrawal in that huddle break was not purely physical? What if what you are watching in that moment is a player who is dealing with something that goes beyond a back injury? What if what you are seeing is the body language of someone who is carrying something heavier than a physical ailment? Someone who is navigating a situation inside that locker room, inside that franchise, inside that organization, that the official press release was never going to describe accurately? I am not telling you which explanation is correct. I am telling you that the footage exists. I am telling you that the footage is being watched by hundreds of thousands of people. And I am telling you that the official story does not comfortably account for everything that footage shows. And here is the receipt. Here is the moment that the PA system itself documented the exit, with no spin, no press release, no management. The arena announcer confirming what the footage already showed us. Watch this. Shooting for Caitlin, number 11. That is the arena public address system confirming in real time in front of everyone in that building that Caitlin Clark was being substituted out of that game. That is not a rumor. That is not a hot take. That is the official record of the moment she left, and she never came back. The PA system announced her replacement. The game continued, and Caitlin Clark did not return to that bench for the remainder of the contest. Let that sink in for a second. Now let us talk about Amber Cox. Because Amber Cox is the second thread in this story, and it is a thread that the establishment has been remarkably quiet about. For those who need context, Amber Cox is a front office figure connected to the Indiana Fever organization. She was present at that game. She was present in a capacity that put her in direct contact with what was happening with Caitlin Clark's situation in real time. Here is what the footage documents. Amber Cox made multiple trips to the locker room during the period after Caitlin Clark's exit. Not one trip. Not a quick check-in and return. Multiple trips, back and forth, back and forth. The footage captures her returning from the locker room and immediately going into conversation with Kelly Cristal, and then going back again. 2, possibly 3 separate trips documented in the footage while the game was still being played on the floor in front of her. Now I want you to think about what that behavior pattern communicates. When a front office representative is making multiple trips to the locker room during an active game, while the team's most important player is absent from the bench, while the official story is that this is a routine injury evaluation, that behavior pattern does not read as routine. That behavior pattern reads as management. Active, urgent, real-time management of a situation that is more complicated than a back injury. Multiple trips, multiple conversations, multiple moments of going back and forth between the floor and the locker room. The footage documents all of it, and the establishment has said nothing about it. Nothing. No explanation of what those conversations were. No context for why the back and forth was necessary. No acknowledgement that the footage even exists. Just silence. The brutal, deliberate, calculated silence of people who are hoping that the footage gets buried before too many people see it. It does not get buried. Not here. Not today. Let me now walk you through the tactical reality of what Caitlin Clark's absence from the bench actually means. Because this is the part of the story that the establishment most desperately wants to minimize. In professional basketball, when a player is injured and cannot return to play, the standard protocol is for that player to remain visible on the bench, dressed, present, engaged with the team. This is not a courtesy. This is a professional expectation, a team culture norm, a basic part of being a member of an active roster, even when you are physically unable to contribute on the floor. The footage from that game documents no such presence. Caitlin Clark went to the locker room, and she did not come back to the bench. She was not visible on the sideline for the remainder of that game. She was not there in the way that an injured player who has been evaluated and cleared to observe would typically be there. She was simply gone, absent, removed from the public eye entirely for the duration of that contest. And I want you to sit with the weight of that for a moment, because it is genuinely significant. The most watched player in the WNBA, The player whose presence in this league has driven television ratings, ticket sales, merchandise revenue, and national media attention to levels this league has not seen in decades. That player was not on the bench. That player was not visible to the fans who came to that arena specifically to watch her play. That player was in the locker room, with multiple front office figures making repeated trips back and forth to check on a situation that apparently required that level of active management. This is not a small thing. This is not a routine injury situation that was handled with routine professionalism. The footage, the behavior pattern, the absence from the bench, all of it points to something more complicated, more fraught, more revealing about the internal dynamics of that franchise than the official story was ever going to acknowledge. Let us now talk about the pattern. Because this is not the first time that questions have been raised about the way Caitlin Clark's situation inside that organization has been managed. This is not the first time that the gap between the official narrative and the observable reality has been glaring enough to generate this kind of scrutiny. The establishment has a pattern of presenting a clean, simple, palatable version of events involving Caitlin Clark, and then watching that version get dismantled by footage, by eyewitness accounts, by the unavoidable evidence of what people can see with their own eyes. The pattern is this: something happens involving Caitlin Clark that does not fit the preferred narrative. The official story is released, the official story is distributed through the approved channels, and then the footage surfaces. The footage that was captured by someone who was actually there. The footage that does not have a producer deciding what to cut away from. The footage that shows you what the broadcast camera was not pointed at, what the press release did not describe, what the establishment was hoping you would not see. That pattern has repeated itself. It is repeating itself right now, with this footage, with this story, with this exit from this game. The footage is viral, the footage is being watched, and the official story is not surviving contact with it. I want to be entirely clear about something. The people who run this league have a financial interest in managing the Caitlin Clark narrative carefully. She is the most valuable asset this league has had in a generation. The way her story is told, the way her struggles are framed, the way her exits and her absences and her moments of visible distress are explained to the public, all of that has enormous financial and reputational stakes attached to it. The establishment does not manage this narrative carelessly. They manage it deliberately, strategically, and with full awareness of what the footage might show if people look too closely. Which is exactly why people are looking, which is exactly why this footage is viral, which is exactly why we are here today. Now let us talk about the enablers. Because no narrative management operation runs on one person. The silence around what that footage actually shows is not the silence of one individual making one decision. It is the silence of a system of people who have decided, collectively, that the official story is the story they are going with, and that the footage can be managed, minimized, and eventually forgotten if enough time passes and enough other stories come along to bury it. The front office figures who were present at that game and who made those multiple trips to the locker room, they know what those conversations were about. They know what the situation actually was. They know whether the official injury explanation fully accounts for what was happening in that locker room. And they have chosen silence. Deliberate, strategic, institutional silence. The broadcast apparatus that covered that game, they know what their cameras were pointed at and what they were not pointed at. They know what the sideline reporter saw and what the sideline reporter was not asked to report on. They know that the footage being watched by hundreds of thousands of people on social media shows things that their broadcast did not show. And they have chosen silence. The people who drafted the official injury report, the people who crafted the messaging, the people who decided how this story would be told to the public, they made choices, deliberate choices about what to include and what to leave out. And those choices are now being evaluated against footage that they did not control, footage that they did not anticipate, footage that a fan with a phone captured because they were simply present and paying attention. That is the thing about footage. It does not cooperate with the narrative. It just shows you what happened. And now I want to talk about the cost. Because behind all of the narrative management, behind all of the official statements and the strategic silences and the multiple trips to the locker room, there is a human being. There is Caitlin Clark, who walked off that court, walked to that locker room, and did not come back. And whatever the full truth of that situation is, whether it is purely physical, whether it is more complicated than that, whether there are dynamics inside that franchise that the official story is not capturing, the cost of how this has been handled falls on her. She is the most scrutinized player in this league. Every moment she is on that court is documented, analyzed, debated. Every moment she is not on that court is documented, analyzed, debated. Her exits, her absences, her expressions, her body language, her hands in a huddle break, all of it is being watched, all of it is being recorded, all of it is being put under a microscope by hundreds of thousands of people who care deeply about what happens to her. And the people who are supposed to be managing her situation, protecting her, creating the conditions for her to succeed, they are making multiple trips to the locker room during an active game while the footage rolls and the questions pile up and the official story continues to not fully account for what the camera is showing. Caitlin Clark deserves better than this. Caitlin Clark deserves an organization that handles these moments with the kind of transparency and professionalism that a player of her significance warrants. She deserves an official story that matches the observable reality. She deserves to not have her exits and her absences become viral mysteries that hundreds of thousands of people are trying to decode because the official explanation left too many questions unanswered. She is not the problem here. She has never been the problem here. She is the wronged party in a situation that the people who run this league have consistently failed to manage with the honesty and the transparency that she and the fans who watch her deserve. Let me now tell you what I believe happens next. Because the verdict on this situation is not complicated, and the predictions are not difficult to make if you are willing to look at the pattern honestly. First prediction. The official story does not get cleaner. It gets murkier. Every time footage surfaces that does not align with the official narrative, the establishment's response has been to double down on the original story, to add qualifications, to introduce new details that were conspicuously absent from the original press release. That pattern will continue. The official story will be refined, adjusted, and re-released in a form that attempts to account for what the footage shows. It will not fully succeed. The footage is too specific, too detailed, too clearly showing things that the official story cannot comfortably explain. Second prediction. The questions about the bench absence do not go away. This is the detail that matters most. An injured player who has been evaluated and cleared to observe does not disappear from the bench. That absence is the most anomalous detail in the entire sequence of events, and it is the detail that will continue to generate scrutiny long after the official story has been updated and re-released. The establishment cannot explain the bench absence with a back injury narrative, and they know it. Watch for how they handle this going forward. Third prediction. Amber Cox's multiple trips to the locker room become a story in themselves. The footage is too specific. The behavior pattern is too unusual. The number of trips, 2, possibly 3, documented on camera during an active game, is not consistent with a routine injury evaluation. That detail is going to continue to attract attention, and the establishment's silence on it is going to become increasingly difficult to maintain as the footage continues to circulate. Fourth prediction. Caitlin Clark comes back. She comes back to that court. She comes back to that floor and she plays. And when she does, the scrutiny of how she is being managed, how her situation is being handled, how the gap between the official narrative and the observable reality is being navigated, that scrutiny does not diminish. It intensifies. Because the footage exists, because the questions are documented, because the pattern is established. And here is the thing about Caitlin Clark. She is not going anywhere. She is not going to be managed into irrelevance by an establishment that finds her inconvenient. She is not going to be buried by official stories that do not match the footage. She is going to walk back out onto that court, and she is going to play, and the people who have been managing her narrative are going to have to reckon with the fact that the footage they hoped would disappear is still out there, still being watched, still asking questions that they have not answered. There is one more thing I want to say before we close, and it is the most important thing in this entire video. The reason this footage is viral is not because people hate Caitlin Clark. The reason this footage is viral is not because people want her to be hurt or want her franchise to fail or want the worst possible interpretation of events to be true. The reason this footage is viral is because people care. Deeply, passionately, intensely care about what is happening to this player and this league. The people watching this footage, the people sharing it, the people asking the questions that the official story has not answered, they are not the enemy of Caitlin Clark. They are her most engaged, most attentive, most invested audience. They are the people who are paying attention precisely because they care what happens to her. They are the people who are not willing to accept a press release that does not match what a camera recorded in real time. That is not a problem for Caitlin Clark. That is a problem for the establishment. That is a problem for the people who run this league and who have decided that narrative management is a substitute for transparency. That is a problem for the front office figures who are making multiple trips to the locker room while the footage rolls and the questions pile up. Caitlin Clark right now in this moment is doing what she has always done. She is enduring the scrutiny, absorbing the chaos, navigating the gap between the official story and the observable reality, and preparing to walk back out onto that court and play basketball. That is who she is, that is what she does. And no amount of official story management, no amount of strategic silence, no amount of carefully crafted press releases is going to change that fundamental truth about her. The footage is out there, the questions are documented, the pattern is established, and we are watching. Here is the question I want you to answer in the comments right now, and I want you to be specific. Do you believe the official explanation for Caitlin Clark's exit from that game fully accounts for everything the footage shows? The walk to the locker room, the huddle hand withdrawal, the bench absence, and Amber Cox's multiple trips back and forth? Yes or no, and tell me why. That is the forced choice. That is the question the establishment cannot answer for you, so you have to answer it for yourself. If this video gave you something to think about, something to look at differently, something that the broadcast did not show you and the press release did not tell you, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Rim Run if you are not already here, because we are going to keep following this story, keep documenting the gap between the official narrative and the observable reality, and keep asking the questions that the establishment is counting on you to forget. Hit that notification bell so you do not miss the next video, because this story is not over, not even close. This is Rim Run. We will see you in the next one.